If I ruled the world, I love them, baby.
If I Rule the World podcast welcomes Michael Alig.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Well, thank you for having us to your friend's place. We're in Coney Island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to live here, actually.
Oh, really?
This is where I lived before I live where I live now.
Oh, okay. This is my first time in Coney Island ever.
A lot of people don't have a reason to come down here other than the roller coaster, which is the only reason I ever came down here before. And then Seagate, this area right here is completely closed off. It was, I think they say it was the first gated community, and they say it in a way that they're proud of.
Yeah.
the first community to exclude people, but it's still gated. They're weird. A lot of policemen live here, actually.
Yeah, and it's like a big population of Hasidic Jews.
Oh,
I
yeah,
noticed.
yeah.
Which we said they're probably the happiest people that the weather is changing because they're hardcore in the summer.
Yeah.
They dress the same in the winter as the summer.
Yeah, they're finally ready for the the weather.
The weather change.
I think they enjoy the suffering.
Yeah, it could be like
kind
a
of
religious
like,
thing.
Yeah.
I suffer during the summer, so
Yeah.
I'm a fall baby.
But Michael, this is not the first time I met you. I wrote you a little bit on the email. We were talking before, but let me flesh it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, summer of 1988, I was best friends with Jason Zambito, and I was getting into like punk rock and hardcore. He was getting into like DJ culture, both downtown Manhattan stuff, but just in different spots. So he was like, "Oh, come out with me. Let's go into Manhattan." So we told our parents we were sleeping at each other's house. We drove into Manhattan with a couple of our friends, and we met up with you. And I didn't know who you were. I didn't know anything about you. And this was 1988, so it was before.
What club was that at then?
The first thing we went to was Big City Diner. Keoki was spinning. And I remember because I carried Keoki's records out to the car afterwards.
I carried Keoki home.
I thought he was going with that too.
No, I carried his records. Like, there's just distinct things I remembered. I remembered you being really, really nice to me. And I was 15. I didn't know what I was doing. We got into the tunnel and the world, and you just got us in. And, so we spent the whole night there. We're going home. And it turns out the guy who drove us in, his car got towed. Oh. So we had to come back, and you let us crash on your couch, sleep in the park. I don't know if it was yours or Keoki's place or you guys lived together or what it was.
Did we live across the street from Big City Diner? In a big, tall building?
It was a big, tall building. There was a swimming pool because you guys went swimming.
Yeah.
So I don't know whose place that
was.
was.
It was Riverbank West. That was with a circular driveway and the fountain in the middle. It was across the street from Big City Diner.
It was nice. It was a very nice place. But yeah, you let me crash on your couch, and that's how I first met you. I don't expect you to remember all that stuff, but it was.
I'm glad I was nice to you. I mean, I have a reputation as being like a mean person, but I mean, I don't ever remember being mean. Maybe I'm only mean when I'm like high on drugs or drunk or something. And I think even when I'm mean though, I think I'm being funny.
Right.
But other people think I'm being mean.
But it was the outrageousness of the club kid. Like if I met you in like 92 or whatever, and you were at a different stage with club kid, because I remember watching TV and you came on, it was like Geraldo or Donahue or something like that. And I was standing next to my mom, and my mom was like, "What the hell is this?" And
That's my friend.
I almost was like, I know that guy. But it was a different thing. So that outrageousness would have probably rubbed me the wrong way. If I was 15, I wouldn't have known like what to do with it. Just a suburban Long Island kid. And also like the punk and hardcore scene was very like just a different thing.
It's interesting you say that because the punk and hardcore scene were one of the first other subcultures to embrace us and vice versa.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe it was joining forces because there's safety in numbers, or there's power in numbers or something.
Well, because what you were doing was more punk rock than punk rock.
It was punk rock, yeah.
So if you were someone who was rebellious and you're like, look, punk and hardcore is great for what it is, but you would go to a VFW hall and they'd be like, no smoking, no drinking, straight. So if that wasn't the reason you got into that music, it could feel boring. Yeah. I would go to raves because it felt more punk rock than the hardcore shows. I wasn't involved in that scene, but it felt more like, okay, well, there's girls and drugs here. This is a lot more fun.
That's kind of what drew me. Like I was more into other styles of music, but like it was just a chaos. It was just like an outlaw party, man. You just went and it was just drugs and girls, and it was like you hang out and anything could happen.
Right.
Like shows were just kind of shows.
Well, the anything can happen thing is a really important thing because it was one of the things I insisted upon at any club that I worked at or directed was that we wouldn't have any rules because when you go to a club in Cleveland or whatever and you see all these signs at the door like what must be 21 to enter, 2 forms of ID, no sneakers, blah blah blah, on and on and on. It's like you're entering an institution and. You shouldn't have those kinds of rules in a nightclub. A nightclub should be a place where you can go do what you want, and it isn't. And they say, well, you have to have a dress policy and all that. You don't need to have a dress policy. You need to have a doorman, and the doorman can tell by looking at you. And it's not even about really what you're wearing. It's about what's inside your head and how you behave and all that. So, and it's not about being good looking or anything like that. People really have that misunderstood. It's about what's inside your brain and how you behave. And if you're tolerant of other people and you're tolerant of what we're doing, then we would be tolerant of you. And as long as there's not going to be any problem, then everybody's welcome.
Right. So that door guy thing is a skill.
Yes, and it's I think that these days it's I don't know what the word is.
Misrepresented, misunderstood.
It is misrepresented and misunderstood, but it's also, I think, they're dying breeds because they're not necessary so much anymore because those clubs don't exist. But that doorman has to make a lot of times a snap decision based upon a lot of different things, and just based upon a 5-second conversation with the person, and then they have to decide whether or not to charge them, if they can get away with making them pay, if they can, and then what happens when you say, it's $20 to get in, and they say that they don't have $20, do you let them leave, or do you then say, oh no, okay, I'll let you do it for free? I mean, it's it's hard to do that without looking stupid.
Right.
So there's a lot of things going on there that doormen need to know. That's why they get paid so much. We paid our doormen sometimes $1,000 a night.
Really?
God damn.
Man, wow. That's added to the list of things that I say I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah.
and yeah, it's interesting you saying that because not knowing anything.
But they're
I
worth
would
it because
think,
they'll make you $1,000 in a few minutes.
Right. And I wouldn't know any of that because I would think of it just simply as being what's the word I'm looking for? Elitist, right? Like, oh, you can come in, you can't, and that would be my perspective.
It looks like that,
yeah,
but it isn't really, because and also the doorman's worth something if they have friends, if they know all the right people, because they have to know who what Mark Jacobs looks like or what these people look like, because you don't want those people come to the club and then not getting in or not being recognized,
Right. And you had said something just before about there are no rules in the parties that you did, and I'm wondering how. Like you threw parties, and I wonder how much you.
That didn't work out so well in the end, but
it did not. We'll get to that. But what did you do for it? How did you curate these parties in the sense that there are no rules, but you had to bring something to the table to get everybody there? So what exactly did you do?
Well, I guess if you go from the beginning to the end, a lot of times I would even scout the location of the club. I would find the club, then find the person to pay for everything, which there were a handful of people like that in New York at the time, and whichever one would agree to pay for everything, bring him in and show him the space, and then they would sort of take over from there, and they would get the space and prepare it for opening, and then I would hire the different designers and artists and people that I'd want to make the rooms, however we want them, or come up with a concept for the club. I really like concept clubs, so I would a lot of times come up with a whole entire concept, like for USA. I don't know if you remember USA.
No.
USA was a concept club. It was the idea was it was a satire of the United States, basically, and so it was all about packaging and consumerism and advertising and things like that, and everything from the drink tickets, which had logos of different companies, and on the one side it had the logo, and then on the other side it said this drink has been generously paid for by a contribution from the Ford Motor Company or whatever,
right?
Which they weren't, but we actually got a lot of flack for that from fabulous people who thought that we had sold out to corporations and that we were allowing Ford Motor Company to dictate.
Oh, so they believed it.
Yeah, but they say the best satire is often confused for the real thing. So
absolutely.
So then I would do that, and then book a couple months worth of events, so that we get going with some high profile events and DJs and get the doormen and put everything together, and then hire all the hosts and the promoters and get everything going.
What might be missed in your story is the entrepreneurial spirit of it all. That's a lot of work, and it's a lot of thinking and trying to stay ahead of things and think of other things, commerce that comes through the club and making the club happy. Were you always that way when you grew up?
Yeah, I was, because my mom, my mom and dad got a divorce when I was very young, and my mom didn't have any money, and she was from Germany, and English wasn't her first language, so when she got a divorce from my father, she was kind of on her own with me and my brother, and so she was on food stamps and welfare and housing allowance and all these programs, and we got free lunches at school and everything, and it was embarrassing, and so I never wanted to be like that. Money was always important to me, to save money so I wouldn't be in that situation. So even in high school, in grade school, I was saving up already for my adulthood. I was selling candy bars in school and stuff like that, to save, to put money in the bank so I could save. I started a retirement fund when I was like 14, and the manager of the bank, at first he made fun of me, but then then after about a few months of him seeing me put money in the bank, I don't know why this is like so much stuff for me, but after a while of seeing me do that, he made a comment to my mom about how he at first he was laughing at me, but he said he wants to be there one day when he sees my something about my driveway being paved with gold. I don't know what he's talking about, but it was a compliment actually. So.
Because that's not something he's gonna see ever. Like a 14-year-old opening a retirement.
At this point, I wish I would have done something like that. It's a lot of foresight.
When I moved to New York, I emptied that account and I spent it in like 2 days because everything was so expensive. And then that's when I realized that like what seemed like a lot of money in Indiana was nothing.
And when I walked in, I handed you an interview that you did in the winter of 1995, and I reread it last night, and it has some of that. You were talking about buying an apartment with a 10-year mortgage, so it'll be done in 10 years.
Right.
There was a lot more. You picture Michael Alig, and you picture the videos that you've seen, and the stories. And I knew better, but I hadn't visited that in a while. So reading that stuff and getting prepared for the interview, I remembered some of this stuff that you beyond this, part of the story is how much entrepreneurial spirit and foresight you've had.
Tremendous anxiety over supporting myself because what I do is very difficult to package to other people and to make tangible the financial element of it, because so much of what I do actually loses money. So it's hard to explain to a billionaire why it makes sense to, a lot of times when we would open a club, the first 6 months or sometimes even the first year, the club doesn't make any money. And it's hard to explain to the person who's just put $20 million into the space why we have to keep the man with waving a $50 bill, why we have to keep him out and let in this person who has no money, and in fact who we have to pay to come here, and we have to give them free drinks, and we we have to do this for a year, and every day really it gets harder and harder every single day, and at some point you just have to say, okay, fine, let them in, then that's when the club starts to make money, but it's also the beginning of the end, and then usually what happens is right around that point, some other multimillionaire comes to the club and says, oh boy, this place must be making a fortune. I better hire the person who's running this club and open up my own club. So then we go to the next club. And just for that club started to make money, and then take all those great people over to the new club, and then the people who we've kept out for a year are still at the other club, and they're wondering what all the excitement was about, and then they hear about the club down the street. So then they try to go down there, and then for the next year they can't get in there, and then the whole thing happens again.
Does it still work like that, or are you talking about that era?
It actually never worked. We made it look like it worked. Because
exclusive.
You can see
really good job.
Well, you can see how it wouldn't work, because just when the club starts to make money, we're on to someplace else, and then the people who are spending money don't want to go there anymore.
Right.
And sometimes it'll empty out, like after a week after we're all gone, it'll empty out, and then they'll be left with an empty club. So, and I was my thing was always, well, why doesn't the old club owner tell the new club owner? And Rudolph, who was my boss at the time, he said a lot of times it's because they like to see it happen to somebody else. They don't,
That makes
and they don't
sense.
want to look stupid.
I mean, so was it lucrative for you?
It's
in those
lucrative
years?
for me, and it was lucrative for all of the people who worked at the club. It was oftentimes not lucrative for the club owner, and who, by the time I got to Peter, who owned Limelight at the time, when my first meeting with Peter, well, it was actually my second meeting with Peter, but when we discussed all this, and he said, I've seen you bankrupt every single club owner in the town, and we had bankrupted every club owner in town, and he said, you're not going to, Michael Alig will not be the ruination of Peter Gation, and so he allowed us to do what we did, but he tempered it a little bit.
Okay.
And I've noticed that, looking back now, I can tell that the club owners that gave me too much leeway didn't make any money.
Okay.
They were the ones who let us do anything we wanted. They didn't make any money. The ones who gave me not enough leeway didn't make any money. They were the ones who said, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't. They didn't make any money.
Right.
But Peter was exactly in the middle, and he let us get away with just enough, and then he would roll it in when it was too much, and he made a fortune. So it was important to have somebody who knew just how much to let us get away with, and then he would say no more.
Right, and that's like we're talking about your entrepreneurial spirit and your business mind that you seem to have had since you were young. Did you sort of like push that aside for the art brain?
He was what taught me that you need both.
Right.
You need to have just the right amount, and it's a difficult line to straddle. Madonna seems to be doing it well. Lady Gaga does it well.
Yeah.
You want to be at that point where you're just on the cusp of what's acceptable and boundary pushing. You're there. You're far enough out there that people will recognize you as the one who's pushing the boundaries, but not so far out that you confuse or scare people.
Right.
And I would always get at that point, and then I would become bored, and then I would push it a little bit more because it was boring for me. So I would push a little bit more and a little bit more, and then I was at the point that's confused or scared people.
Right.
And so it didn't work. So you really have to stay at that point and know when to push and when not to push. I always knew when to push and when not to push, but I would push anyway.
Right. All right. So that point that you moved from, what was it, Indiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it for a particular reason, or you're like, I just got to get over there, or I got to get out of here?
Well, it was for all of those things. I needed to get out of there, and I wanted to come here, but I also needed to go to college. Well, I didn't need to go. I wanted to go to college, and I got a scholarship for Fordham, so I went there mostly because of that, because it was a free place to live, because it came with a room and whatever. So that was the reason that I went.
Okay. So, and then what did you discover first in nightlife? Was it the club scene? Was it punk? What was it?
It was kind of punk. It was like London Batcave kind of thing.
Okay.
Because it was very Susie and the Banshees and Depeche Mode and Mark Almond and that kind of thing. That was big back then. It was in '84. So
Right.
Mark Almond was really big, and he and Nina Hagen and those people were at this club Danceteria a lot, and which was the first club that I went to. And my roommate in college was dating Keith Haring,
Okay.
and who was not really a big artist at the time, but was becoming a big artist. And he would take us to clubs that probably we wouldn't normally have gotten into, and like Area, and we'd hang out with Grace Jones and people like that. And it was very, very impressive to me.
Yeah.
And I guess it was also lucky for me because that got me into, to meet people that I wouldn't have normally met, and then I was able to get jobs and stuff like that at the clubs because they knew me then.
Right. And that was a lot of people's start, right? Danceteria is one of those names you hear. Madonna, Beastie Boys, all legendary starts, I would say.
Yeah, is that something that you fell in love with right away, coming from Indiana?
I enjoyed the idea of being at the place where things start because I guess it's a power thing, because it's a tremendous power to know that you're in this group of people that makes all the decisions of what other people are going to be doing in 6 months or a year or whatever. It sounds kind of mean, girls, but it's exciting, and I remember going home for Christmas that year and seeing something about Keith Haring on MTV, and and I was sort of like, that's the person I'm hanging out with, you know.
Yeah.
So that made me feel that I was on the right track, that I was, you know, hanging out with the right people and doing the right things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like exciting, you know, just exciting, like just coming from, like I said, I've never been to Indiana, but I'm sure it's different as far as like nightlife goes and stuff.
Nightlife in Indiana is very kind of like honky tonk. Like there's Ramona's Car Wash and a place called the Ace High, and they're like, you know, with jukeboxes that play like, you know, country western.
Mellencamp.
Yeah, and like, and they close at 2:00, and you know,
Closing at 2:00 is bananas.
and
Whenever
happy hours and stuff like that.
yeah, whenever I go somewhere and the city, like we went to Chicago last year, and it's an awesome city, but like at 2 a.m. I'm like, where the fuck do people go?
Worse, Los Angeles, where
LA is like that.
at 1:45 they walk around taking drinks out of your hand.
Yeah.
You would think of all places.
Of all places.
Yeah.
Of all places.
I mean, do you know how fabulous Los Angeles would be with all those celebrities if they had a thriving club scene?
Yeah.
I mean, forget it. I don't understand why somebody doesn't fight for that, because I mean, they're a city that cares about publicity and media attention and things like that, and that those things go hand in hand. If they had a thriving nightlife scene, and honestly, because the nightclub closing laws were made at a time when they were necessary, because for the same reason that there are the blue laws, like certain states where you can't drink, we can't buy alcohol on Sundays, whatever. It's because the husbands weren't going home, you know, to their wives or whatever, and so those laws are so antiquated that they should get rid of them. The clubs should be open 24 hours if we want them to be, and Los Angeles would be such a great city. One of the things that's keeping it from being cool is that.
Yeah.
It's funny just hearing you say stuff like that, because it's so, I guess, a part of who you are. Do you feel like you can go to like another city, you know, even like under a different name, and like have that same game plan and do what you did in, like, let's say New York?
Well, I've been thinking a lot actually about doing it in either London or Berlin, because the media in Berlin really likes me because I'm German, and because when I do interviews in Germany, I speak in German to them, and they don't seem to have the same kind of puritanical kind of hatred toward me because I've committed a sin or whatever. Because I did do a bad thing, but I've also done a lot of good things. So, like everybody has, you know, and maybe my bad things that was worse than other people's bad things, but my good things might have been better than other good people. It's just, you know, so
Nobody's one thing.
right, and when I go over there, I think I can do things that I can't do here. And in Germany, especially, where there are, it's like that, where there are no laws concerning club openings and drinking age and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And because of what I've done here in New York, and Party Monster was very, I think it made more money in Germany than in the United States.
Really?
So I think that if we did something like that, like what we did here, and you'd need probably 2 or 3 large clubs and maybe a restaurant and a gallery maybe or something to create a scene, and a magazine create or something, and I think it would do very well, and I think that people would be very eager to be involved with it.
Yeah, and what I like, you know, because you understand the mechanics of it, so that's what I'm admiring, is that, you know, like most people, you know, like I'll walk by and I'll hear some chords, and I'm like, oh, I can make a song out of this. So you're looking at something in a creative way differently. Like, you know, you see like a club where you're like, oh, I think this club would really work. So you understand. It's almost like,
I mean, I thought everybody felt like that, honestly, until now, just now when you said that.
No.
I mean, like, I can't imagine that they
It's a
wouldn't feel
solid
that
no.
way.
yeah, that's how I feel about, like, you know, like us with music. It's like I
Right.
hear music in my head all day long, and then when I talk to people, that's not the way their head works. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
I mean, me and my friends, when we go to, like, you know, if we're in like some place in Pennsylvania, like we were yesterday, and we saw like all these abandoned buildings. I was there with Patrick and the guy whose house it is, and we were just in awe looking at these buildings, saying, "Well, that would be a great club. Well, the VIP room would be over there, and the DJ booth would be here." And you know, so all my friends think like that.
That's how your brain is wired
Yeah.
after all of these years of doing it back then. And you think about something like Berlin compared to New York, they probably don't have the same high taxes, costs, insurance,
Well,
and it's
that's-
only gotten higher out here.
I know. That's the one thing that is one of the things that killed the scene more than anything is the lack of affordable housing, because
Right.
People, cool people who are cool generally don't have a lot of money.
Right.
And they
Maybe I'm cool.
Right, and that's what they trade in. That's their commodity.
Right.
So they and they can't. They used to be able to do that in New York. They could get everything for free, but they can't now. So but they can still in Berlin. And if they have to pay for housing, you can still get there's tons of affordable housing. After the wall came down, East Berlin opened up and was a ghost town for many years, and has then it turned into kind of like an East Village kind of thing because everybody left it and it was abandoned. So what happens in abandoned places? The cool people go in, take it over. They turned the train stations into nightclubs, and
Absolutely.
it was very cool, and it's still very cool. And there's still a lot of housing there that you can get an apartment for next to nothing. So I mean, I'm very seriously considering going there now that I no longer have any kind of reportings to anybody or anything like that. So
Right. So that means that your parole is over. Is that what you're referring?
Mm-hmm.
And that means you could just do whatever you want, and there was a restrictive time for you. How long was that? 4 years? 5 years?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And during that time, you had a couple of run-ins, a couple of problems.
I mean, I don't know what you consider a run-in. What do you mean a run-in? What's
There was
a run-in?
something in the Bronx, from what I remember.
Yeah. It wasn't.
But it didn't hurt. It didn't affect
No.
your parole.
I honestly, I was taking drugs to a drug dealer, and I was honest with them, and I think she appreciated that I was honest with her. She knew my parole officer. She knew what I was doing. And that was part of the problem on her end, was that she couldn't do very much about it because she knew about it.
Right.
So she knew that I was dating a drug dealer, which she knew that I was living with a drug dealer, and so she was also kind of a therapist for me. So when I was talking to her about my problems, my relationship problems, and I told her, I said that he's not a very good drug dealer because he either loses his money because he's high, or he doesn't make good deals with people, and so he never has money to re-up, and that was my problem. So I suggested to her my suggestion to fix that was that I give him money to re-up,
Right.
and that I do the re-up. I buy for him, and then when he needs it, I dole it out to him. So what I didn't realize was that I was telling her that I was becoming the drug dealer, but she never said that doesn't sound like a very good idea.
Yeah.
So I just did it. And the first time I tried to dole out the drugs to him, he's like, "You're not my father. You can't." Right. I said, "Well, you know what? I paid for the drugs, so I'm going to take them back." So that's where I was going. I was taking them back to the drug dealer. And I just happened to be walking through the park at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I guess I looked suspicious. And they asked me if I had anything on me. And I said, no. And they said, "Can we check you?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "We're not going to find anything." I said, "No." And they reached there, and right when they got to my pocket, I said, "Well, except in that pocket, I have something." And I had like an ounce of crystal meth. And and they were like, "Well, you should have told us." I said, "Well, I just did. I told you before you put your hand in
Right.
there." And honestly, I don't know what happened. I did tell them that, because my boyfriend was at the time, he's a Santeria priest,
Santeria, yeah.
and there is something in Santeria that it's a crystal that looks just like crystal meth, and it's something they use in ceremonies. And I told them that's what it was, and they believed it.
Wow.
My parole officer didn't believe it,
Right.
but I didn't get in any trouble for it. So there was no. There was no legal trouble or everything, but she knew what it was, so she was upset. But what could she do? I mean, she said yes all along to all these things, so she couldn't then go to her supervisor and say, "Well, now So anyway, I only had a few months left to go, so.
Right.
And it's funny because like for me, like I did probation. I never got parole. But, I did some couple of 30 days here and there, and I went to a therapeutic community for 2 years over drugs. Right. Now, so like at the end, because I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe it's, because you loved the person you were with, like there was no fear of the repercussions if you got caught after doing so much time.
See, there wasn't, because I felt that I was being honest with them about it.
Yeah.
I was telling them what I was doing before I was doing it. If she would have told me not to do it, I wouldn't have done it.
Okay.
But I guess I was kind of testing her to see if it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
And she never said not to. So I figured if I do get caught, I will come to her and say, "Well, I got caught doing the thing that you said was okay for me to do."
Right.
Sort of,
Still testing that boundary.
Maybe
Well,
she was testing you back.
Yeah.
It's like a weird art of
S&M
war
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way. But I guess because I felt okay because she knew about it.
Yeah.
If she didn't know about it, I would have been scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just hearing that gave me anxiety.
Now you say therapeutic community because that gives me anxiety because that's what they tried to send me to, and I was so scared. It was called Pride something on Avenue D and Pride Side or something, and I walked in, and they were really nice to me because they didn't know, I guess, that I was being sent in by parole or whatever. They thought that I was there. Like I walk in, and so they were being really nice. We're all at the welcome wagon and to get me a drink and everything. And then when it got time on the questionnaire, are you are you coming in for your, are you referred to by anybody? And when I said that I was referred to by my parole officer, the whole thing changed. And she said, "Excuse me for a moment." And she got up, and a whole new crew of people came in.
Oh yeah.
And
the
smiles
the
were
B
gone.
team.
And they were like these big guys, and they were like, they were not welcoming at all.
Yeah.
And they said, I could just tell by the change in their demeanor. And I'd asked her if I could come in tomorrow because I hadn't had time to. I had a lot of things I needed to do at home. I needed to prepare for going away for a little while, and I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. And that's what they want. They don't want you to have time to prepare. So, but that lady was going to let me go home and come back. But the man was like, "You're not going anywhere to come in." And I said, "Well, but she just said that." And he's like, "I don't care what she said. You're not going anywhere." And I said, "Well, can I call my mother?" And he said, "You can call her. You can request a phone call in 45 days."
What?
And I said, "This sounds a whole lot like prison." And I said, "Am I free?" And then he said, after he said you can request a call in 45 days, he said, "Show Mr. Alig his room, please. He's going to be having an early evening tonight."
Yeah.
And they walked me to the room, and it looked very much like a prison cell, and it didn't have any windows, and it was like the shoe, solitary. And that's when I said, do I have to be here by law? And he said, "You're free to do anything you want." And I said, "So I can leave if I want?" And he said, "You are free to do anything you want." But there was this big guy standing in the doorway. And I said, "Well, there's somebody standing at the door. I can't go. I can't leave." And he said, "There's enough room for you to get around him." And I felt very much like it was a trap. And so I said, "I'm afraid to go squeeze in that area in between him and the wall because if I touch him, he might attack me." And I said, "So I'd like to have somebody else here in the room to witness this so that if anything happens, I'll have a witness." And he told the man to move then. He said, "Would you please move?" And so then I just bolted out the door and I just ran out. And I called, but when I got out in the street, I didn't stop running. I just kept running. Oh, and the friend who dropped me off, my friend Jane had dropped me off. She, I guess, sensed that something was not good inside. And she asked to see me. And they told her that I was no longer there, which was really frightening. And so I went out and I called my parole officer, and she answered and she said, "I know." She was already on the phone with them. They had already called and told her. And I said, this, and also they asked me if I had accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, which I told
plot
them,
thickens.
I told them I was really offended by that because I said, he has nothing to do with my drug addiction.
Right.
And they said, "Oh, he has everything to do with it." And, I'm like, what if I would have been Jewish? Or what if I would have been, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and I told her that, and she said, she said, asked me what I suggested that she do with me. So, I said, and I told her, I suggest you cut me off and a year early and let me go,
Right.
But we had to go before a judge, and then it was just a game of delaying and procrastinating and not being able to make it this time because I'm sick or whatever, and just trying to buy time in order to get through the next few months, which she knew I was doing. And then by the time we did get to the judge to make the decision of whether or not to force me to go to this therapeutic community, I had weeks left to go. Mm-hmm. And the judge said, he said, "How much longer are we going to look over Mr. Alig's shoulders to make sure his shoelaces are tied?" Because he said if why are we spending so much money to send him to a therapeutic community that he obviously doesn't want to go to, and when he comes back from, he will probably do what he wants to do. So I said I agree with the judge, and
Wow.
that was it.
It's kind of unexpected, I would imagine.
Well, it was, but it was Judge Block. He's kind of known for he was the same judge that was the judge for the original Peter Gatien thing, and there was a sour taste in his mouth from that. He thought that the DEA had overreached, and he genuinely believed that none of us should have gone to jail, and that the DEA was just like witch hunting, and so he was from the very beginning like against all that.
Oh, well, it makes sense to me. You just hear so many different
Well,
stories.
and all through the entire Department of Corrections, both state and federal, I found that every stereotype that I was expecting to find, I did not find.
Really?
Like I found superintendents who cared about every inmate and cared about their future and like what was going to happen to them when they go home. And I found mental health therapists and psychiatrists who genuinely wanted to help the inmates get better. And I found that if you put in the work and you actually wanted help, that there was more than enough being offered, and that you could have almost anything you wanted done, and that it would be foolish to waste that opportunity to accept all that kind of help.
Right.
It was actually run by some very good people who like genuinely care about what they do, which is shocking.
Yeah, that is not generally what you hear or see. Interesting. And I wanted to get into. I want to make sure that you understand. I want to get to everything you're doing today, and what that's all about. Some of the stuff we wrote about. But in order to get there, we got to get through that chunk of time.
Which chunk of time?
The 17 years that you were in jail, and the reason why you went there.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is a bit of a different audience than you're used to. I just want to get this that fact down of what happened. So just for the record, either you can tell the story or I can read off what happened.
You go ahead. It's kind of like...
I'm sure it's hard for you to do. I just want
it's
to
not
give you
that
that
hard.
option.
It's kind of boring at this point, but go ahead.
It wouldn't be a complete story,
Yeah.
and that's what we're trying to do here. So I'll say it real quick, and if anything is grossly wrong, you can just jump in and say, all right, so... On the night of March 17th, 1996, Michael Alig and his roommate, Robert D. Riggs, also known as Freeze, murdered Andre Angel Melendez.
Well, we didn't murder him.
Okay.
Murder implies premeditation, which there was none. We were never charged with murder and never convicted of murder.
Okay.
So...
how would that be phrased?
the killing of, we killed somebody. I would go so far as to say that it was an accident because...
Yeah, I have that in here too.
So that it wasn't murder.
Okay, so I'll say Robert D. Riggs, also known as Freeze, killed Andre Angel Melendez. Angel Melendez was a friend, a fellow club kid, and sometimes drug dealer of the two. He was killed after an argument in their apartment over many things, including a long-standing drug debt. Alig and Robert Riggs always claimed it was self-defense. Riggs has stated that, and this is a quote from Freeze, on a Sunday in March of 1996, I was at home and Michael Alig and Angel Melendez were loudly arguing and getting louder. I opened the room and started towards the other bedroom, at which point Michael Alig was yelling, "Help me, get him off me." So Angel started shaking him violently and banging him against the wall, meaning Angel was banging Michael against the wall. He was yelling, "You better get my money back or I'll break your neck." That's the end of his quote. So I grabbed the hammer, meaning Freeze grabbed the hammer, and hit Angel over the head. That's the end of his quote. Alig then subsequently had suffocated Angel with a sweatshirt till he died. The pair stashed the body in the bathtub and covered it with ice, wondering what to do. Then continued to party for the next 8 or 9 days, even inviting...
I would take issue with that too. Continued partying for however many days makes it kind of implies that woo, having a great time.
Right.
I would say continued deluding ourselves and running away and hiding and blanketing our problems with drugs and pretending that nothing happened. And believe me, there was no partying. It was
right.
Yeah.
The pair stashed the body in the bathtub and covered it with ice, wondering what to do. Eventually, with the help of 10 bags of heroin and some knives, right, The two dismembered Angel's body and dumped his body parts in the Hudson River. Several pieces would wash up on the shores of Staten Island 8 months later. Detectives were investigating Peter Gation, the owner of the Limelight, for drug charges and had discovered a link between Alig and the disappearance of Angel Melendez. So, after several months of many rumors, articles in the Village Voice, New York Magazine, the New York Post, and even some unofficial confessions by Michael himself in Clubland, Alig was apprehended in a motel room in New Jersey 1 month after Angel's body parts had washed up. So, on October 1st, 1997, Alig and Freeze both pleaded guilty to manslaughter and were sentenced to 10 to 20 years. And after 17 years, Michael was released on parole on May 5th, 2014. Michael Alig has always claimed that he killed Melendez in self-defense and helped to dispose of the body in a panic.
Yeah. It was more than a panic, even. At the time, the clubs were being investigated by the DEA, and we had a mole in the DEA that was telling us whenever we were going to be raided or anything like that. And so they had told us that we were going to be raided the night before Angel came over, and that they had a list of 30 drug dealers who the DEA was going to arrest and then threaten with long sentences unless they agreed to testify against Peter and say that he allowed them or even charged them to sell drugs in the clubs, which wasn't true. But some of them would have probably done that to save their skin. So I was put in charge of calling all the drug dealers and telling them not to come, and one of them was Angel. So when after this had all happened, it occurred to us that it wasn't just a drug dealer that would be found dead in our apartment. It was a potential federal witness against us.
Okay.
And there would have been no explaining that away.
Sure.
And we had at that time 4 nightclubs and with almost 1,000 employees, and
what was that? Limelight, Tunnel,
USA, and Palladium.
Okay.
And Peter had, would kind of jokingly say whenever something was about to jeopardize our liquor license or something like that, he would say that when we lose our liquor license and 1,000 people come for their paycheck next week and it's not there, I'm going to send them to you for an explanation. And so, which is what he said this time. So that's what he said when we asked him what to do, because we didn't know whether to call the police or to call a lawyer or what.
Right.
So that's what he said when we asked him what to do. So to me, that means don't tell anybody, get rid of it, make it go away. So and which made it made logical sense to me, maybe not emotional sense,
right,
but it made logical sense in the way of that we had just devastated probably the lives of a whole family. Why devastate 1,000 more families? Which would have happened. So just let's stem the flow of devastation here and not hurt anybody else.
Right.
That was how we saw it. The law sees it some other way, and I understand that too. And I understand why they see it another way, and they're probably right. In the larger scheme of things, they're right. But I wasn't thinking in the larger scheme of things. I was thinking these 1,000 people immediately, and the here and now.
Right.
So that's kind of where my head was at.
Right. And that's, it's an interesting thing too, because I even saw interviews with Peter Gation and different interviews that you've done over the years, and the sense was that no, Michael isn't like this. Although you were an outrageous individual, and friends can either pull you back or friends can egg you on, and you were around a lot of people egging you on.
Both, yeah. Or they can do both.
Right. You're probably a little bit closer to people egging you on. And we do it as musicians. Someone does a song, you want to do a better song and a crazier song. You were doing more and more outrageous thing. But I get the sense, like, just sort of right at the end, that was really when drugs took over. That although outside looking in, people probably thought you were that crazy with drugs for many years.
I wasn't.
It was sort of right at the end.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy. I pretended to be crazy with drugs for a long time, but because it was part of a look that we were going through many looks, and one of the it started off kind of, the look was like accident victim chic kind of thing, and then it became kind of like celebrity accident victim, and then celebrity accident victim drug addict, and it would have been like Liza Minnelli in a limousine accident or something, covered in blood and like with a champagne glass, and that was kind of the look. So it kind of went along with what we were trying, the visual that we were trying to, give off.
Right. And now, I'm curious, and we talk about this on the podcast too, what somebody takes from one part of their life and uses in another part of their life. And it might be that, you were in the punk and hardcore scene, and then you take that into your work, you do it yourself ethic or whatever it is. You're a rock star. You're the type of guy that it doesn't really matter what you wound up doing in life. People follow you. You have that it factor. You have that thing.
It's so strange to hear. It really is.
If you stop and think, it makes sense to you, though, in a way, right?
I don't know if it does.
It doesn't.
I don't know.
It's just.
It seems weird.
Now, I don't know you, so that's what I'm guessing about you, what I surmise from you.
It makes me feel a little bit creepy.
That's good.
It makes me feel manipulative a little bit. But I don't mean to be.
Manipulative would be
if
using all the skills and trying to purposefully do it.
Right.
But there's just a lot of singers will have
maybe
it.
I'm
They get up on stage.
Maybe it's just so embedded in my DNA that I don't even know I'm doing it.
I mean, it's
It's good to feel creeped
approach.
out by it, though, actually, because then you would say a sociopath goes up the ranks and maybe becomes president and doesn't know that he's doing these things,
Oh, I
but,
think he knows.
There's the case to be made. But I'm curious, now you go into jail and you have what has worked for you, for your life. You're first in there. How did you survive that in your first couple of years?
Again, I will say that I feel so extremely fortunate and grateful for. Fraser and I, when we got to prison, we had no idea what prison was like, and we were fortunate that the judge was, again, I'll tell you, somebody who cared enough to write an order. There's a separation order, which is when two people are arrested for the same case and they want them separate in jail. And there's something the opposite of that. I don't know what it's called, but it's unseparated. It's a together order or whatever. He gave us that because he felt that psychologically it would be so jarring for us to be where we were that we would desperately need each other as like just a shoulder to cry on, just whatever, to commiserate with or something, somebody else who would understand where we're coming from and whatever. So he put an order in that we are to be together the whole time, and that our cells should be next to each other, and we should have access to each other.
Wow.
That
is unbelievable.
It is. It's unbelievable compassion coming from somebody who could have, So our system really, I'm very proud of it. We have a great system. And it's people take advantage of it. We tried not to because we appreciate it so much. And we also let them know, I did anyway, when something like that would happen, I let them know how grateful I was, because I think that's really important too. And every step along the way, we found they did that. When we would get to a facility, the superintendent would call us both in and kind of get a feel to what we're like and what our family is like. Ask his history about where's your family, where's your father, when's the last time you were in contact with him, that kind of thing. And like they really cared, and so. And they let us do, I don't know if it let us do it. They, like when we were at a place called APPU, which we never found out what it stood for. People said it stood for All Purpose Protection Unit, which maybe it was. It was a place where if you're a police officer and you're arrested, you go there. Or
right.
if, like a 50
Some
cent or
celebrity
So it's kind of, we didn't realize that it was like a great place because compared to the rest of I got kicked out of there, and then I realized what it was like. But it was very much a cushy place, and they let me be the person in charge of Halloween parties and events and stuff like that in the prison. So we could do fun stuff like that.
Right.
They actually took me off that position when I suggested that I swear this was just, I had no other hidden meaning about this, but I suggested we do on Halloween, we do trick-or-treating from cell to cell, and we dress in costumes and we go for candy. And
can I just pause you right there, because this is what I'm talking about. The
Yeah.
it factor.
Yeah.
Guess who's throwing Halloween parties in prison and doing trick or treating? Michael Alig,
Well,
because of
Well, guess why
a thing.
they didn't let me do it?
Okay.
Because I think when they say when we asked where they're going to get the costumes, I said that we could take white sheets and cut holes out of them, and I had no. I swear to God, I was not trying to imply anything by that, but they were so appalled because they were all black, and they were
Oh,
they're
wow.
like, why does it have to be white sheets? And they thought that I was trying to be like, whatever, and they took me off, so we didn't get to do it.
And then yet again, the moment that you go just a little too far.
But that was,
Or, yeah. Yeah, I was checking that line.
Yeah,
Like,
so-
all right, this is the line. I got it. I see it. But what's interesting, it seems like you have to create like a new life for yourself in there, especially given the time that you have. So what year was it out of the 17 that you just almost like it felt like, okay, this is just my routine? Like, did it take a while for you to
It did. Well, first of all, then when I was no longer welcome at Peeew, then I went to from then I went into the general population. And when you enter the general population, you have to take a test, some kind of aptitude test. That I, being the teacher's pet that I always was, and I wanted to show off how smart I am and do good on my test. Mm-hmm. Everybody else was telling me, all the other inmates were telling me to do bad on it. But I couldn't understand why I would want to do bad on a test. I want to do good on a test.
Right.
So apparently I did very well on the test, and they so well that they labeled me as a person who could escape from prison. And so every 10 months I was transferred to a new place because they did some kind of test that it took 10 months to get for a smart person to learn enough about a prison to escape.
Wow.
So every 10 months they would move me to another prison. But the drugs in prison are all run by the Bloods, basically. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the leader of the Bloods, this white guy from Staten Island that used to sell ecstasy in all my clubs, mm-hmm. and his crew used to sell ecstasy. There was a big article about them that year that I was arrested in details. They were called the Ecstasy Bandits. That's what the article was called. And he recognized me. And the Bloods kind of saw me as almost a kindred spirit, kind of,
okay.
In that I was the leader of an organization of underground kind of anti-authority, stick it to the man,
right.
counterculture people who rebels, kind of, who took drugs and do illegal things, and so in that way we were similar, And so Dutch. There was a leader of the Bloods, and then each facility has like a president or whatever. So, but the leader spreads the word out to all the people who run each facility that wherever I go, that I was to be given whatever I wanted and make sure nothing happens to me. So, wherever I went before I got there, because the inmates do the transfer sheets. So when I would go to a new place, they would know a day or two before I got there that I was coming, and they would have everything prepared, like whatever drugs I wanted or whatever. So I'd get there, and there'd be like a welcome wagon full of drugs and like anything I want, and like it got really ridiculous, like to the point where like they were like finding people to just like have sex with me and stuff, and like anything I wanted, I was like, I guess again testing to see how much I could get away with.
Right.
And there was this one point.
Once again, the it factor, Michael.
well,
I'm going to keep going back to this.
There was this point at Elmira where there was this guy named Jimbo that I thought was really cute. He was like just like total white trailer trash, missing front tooth, like the whole thing, like Jethro Clampett, you know. And I thought he was so adorable. I like all I said was I thought he was cute. So the guy, the leader of the Blood, sent somebody in to talk to him, and all we know is that like a few minutes later, he came out on a stretcher. That he was stabbed. The guy that they sent in to ask.
Yeah.
And we were all like, "What happened?" And then so I said to the Blood guy, I said, well, why don't we send another guy in there? And if he comes out stabbed, then we'll know that it was because of this. Right. And they actually were going to send another guy in there. And I was like, no, I was just kidding.
Wow.
How's it going?
So that's an interesting angle because if, being that you're attracted to the opposite sex,
same sex.
Same sex that was there. So that almost probably, I would imagine, makes it better.
Almost probably, you would imagine.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
Oh
like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Totally.
Yeah, because it's like me going
Yes.
to an all-female
yes.
jail, being like, okay,
Ilsa,
I guess
Queen
I'll
of
hang.
the Ilsa. Yeah.
So that's like an interesting angle, definitely. So I would imagine that somewhere like you could genuinely date someone.
Oh, totally,
You could
totally.
totally have like real relationships.
Oh, totally, and they do.
So
They
I'm sure
do.
that alleviates at least some of the.
Oh yeah, it does.
So okay, interesting.
And there were people definitely that didn't want to go home because they were in love with somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
That was not me.
Did you get to have deep, meaningful relationships
I
there
did.
with friends
I did.
and
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
and that? So I'm sure there's no one way to sum up those 17 years. It seems like there was different stages.
There were different stages.
By the end, did you have like, okay, now I'm getting out, no more drugs?
Oh, that wasn't the reason for the number. It was because I was upset that the media was calling me a sociopath, and I mean it really upset me.
Yeah.
And because I'm so the opposite of that. I'm so not that, and so almost everything in the media about me is like the opposite of what it really is. But that one really bothered me because I told my psychiatrist it was because I really am a sociopath, but I don't want anybody to know that, so I pretend that I'm really upset by it.
Right.
And
Does that make you?
yeah.
Can't wait to get that soundbite picked up somewhere.
Yeah.
he said, well, I know that's not true because I would spot that a mile away. Well, anyway, but he said that they were calling me sociopath because I did a lot of drugs and I committed a terrible crime while I was on drugs, and then I continued to use drugs. And it looks to people who don't know,
Right.
it looks to them like I'm having a good time, having a party, and just enjoying myself.
Disassociated.
Like I don't care.
Yeah.
But the reality is that I cared so much that I couldn't face the reality, and so I just needed to keep doing anything I could to keep me from having to face it. And a strange allegory, I guess that's the word, to that time was I had stopped shaving, and I didn't realize it was because I didn't like to look at myself in the mirror because I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror, like literally, and more drugs. So she said, the psychiatrist said, if you stop using drugs. Well, and I also said, I'm almost 50 years old. Nobody is going to forgive me for this crime. I'm not going to forgive myself. It's too late to start something new. And I'm never going to be in a relationship because, nobody's going to want to be in a relationship with me because of all this. And so what reason do I have to stop using drugs? And he basically said that if he guaranteed that if I stopped using drugs right now, that in 6 months' time I would have those things. And I said, I'm going to take that challenge and I'm going to stop using drugs right now, and I will show you that I will never have those things.
Right.
And he almost told me exactly how it would happen, and it happened almost exactly how he said it would happen.
Wow.
My friend would visit me and noticed that I was sick from not using dope sick, but that I wasn't asking for drugs. And that showed them that I was serious about not using drugs.
Yeah.
And then they told other friends, and then those other friends started to come to visit me, and kind of like I have a lot of really good friends,
Yeah.
and I feel very fortunate for that.
If you
And
need to take a break or anything.
no.
Okay.
So they came to visit me and to give me positive reinforcement and bring packages and stuff. And in I don't know, some 4 or 5 months' time, almost all of my friends, people had distanced themselves from me, were back in my life and offering me jobs, and I was getting letters from old boyfriends and people that had left me because I was a mess or whatever, that said that they can't wait for me to come home. They want to start, maybe try something out again. And so basically everything that he said would happen happened, and I didn't want to tell him that. I did it eventually. I lied to him for a little time. I said it's not happening, but then I did. I couldn't do that to him, so I told him at the end that
Right.
it did happen. But it was it was kind of unbelievable because you really get to a point where I got to a point where I genuinely believed that. And it was all drugs telling me that. I believed that I was ugly and that I was old and that I didn't, and that I had fooled everybody into thinking that I'm smart and that and that I couldn't do that again. And so, and it was all a fluke. And so my head was cleared, that I realized that that was all the drug talking, or the lack of drug talking,
Right.
or something.
So you get out of jail. We're out of jail now after 17 years. What was it like? Was it like the Twilight Zone?
It was sort of like I guess that's a good way. It was because it felt like an alternate universe.
Yeah.
Like it was the same but it was different. Like the World Trade Center was the same but different.
Yeah.
And Times Square was the same but different. It was definitely like, I'm sure there's a movie somewhere where there's another planet Earth and there's another you, but it's not you.
Yeah. Probably would be Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah. And
Black Mirror.
it was there was something really depressing about very Black Mirror. There's something really depressing about it because I saw like all these Law and Order shows. Like there was like 100 Law and Order shows, and none of them had any personality. It was like there's instead of 5 things like this now, there's 100 things like this now, and they have no personality. And it was like that with everything. And so I saw like this fractal like explosion of like 20 kinds of Pringles and 5,000 TV channels and everything. So there's like exponential growing numbers of things, but they mean less and less. And the flavor, there were so many flavors of everything that you didn't care anymore about what flavor anything was.
Right.
And it was kind of depressing. It's actually very depressing.
Yeah.
But but it's all kind of leading to the singularity, I think, which is when we won't care about any of this anymore, and we're already not caring about it. I think this is the tail end of us caring about this stuff.
And I mean, you come out and you see Facebook and Instagram and all these things. Now, the DNA of a club kid that wants as much attention as possible. Were you like, that's awesome, or were you like, this is just too much?
No, I felt like this is what. I kind of felt like this is what we've spawned a little bit.
Yeah.
Because even though we didn't, we were definitely part of the generation that did. And it was one of those be careful what you wish for things, which there's a lot of them. Almost all of them are be careful what you wish for things, because we thought one day wouldn't it be cool if everybody had purple hair and piercings and
right.
And then that day came and they were like, we wish nobody had purple hair and piercings. So
right.
Everything turned out to be like that. It's all kind of like be careful what you wish for. And again, it's all leading toward the singularity where none of these things really matter anyway.
Right.
Because we're all going to be living online in a virtual world anyway, and happy, I hope.
And you kind of started the whole thing. I mean, who started the famous for just being famous, but the club kids, and that was back then. And now with an Instagram page, you can do that.
Yeah,
real easy.
But I think Andy Warhol probably started it.
Okay.
But I took it and ran with it. There was a course, I don't know if it's still there. Last year it was, and before that it was at Columbia. A course on fabulosity, and that studied the trajectory of from Andy Warhol's idea to me and the club kids to Lady Gaga, and in every step along the way. And it's really interesting. They got it so right. I mean, it's school, so at Columbia they would get it right.
Yeah.
But they got it really right. Every little detail. And when you look at the progression of it, it all makes so much sense. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, they should have had you as a guest speaker.
Oh, they did.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a sense too. Like I'm 45 years old, and I remember downtown, like CBGBs and different clubs, and like I'm older, so on one hand, I'm like, of course, it's better that there's less crime and you can go on a subway at night.
Really,
but on the other side, right? On the other side, like if you have a rebellious spirit, if you're into, like you said before, anti-establishmentarianism. Then it feels like, okay, now it's kind of boring. Like, where do you go? What do you do? And how does that feel for you?
It's interesting because one of the first things I did when I came home, when I saw like all these big buildings going up in places where they used to be, like the gas station on Avenue B.
Yeah.
And
G.G. Allen played. That was
right.
the Disgraceland thing that you were on. That was his last show.
Oh.
At the gas station.
Well, so you see all these buildings going up, and it upset me. And so I came up, I forget what I called it. I'll have to come up with the name because it was a funny name, but it was a group of performance artists, where we would go to these buildings that were having like an open house. They were just opening and like inviting people to come look at the apartments or whatever, and we would stage these things in front of that would look like like a woman running by with her shirt open and bloodied and saying, "Oh, I've been raped," or "This is the 5th time this week I've been raped in this neighborhood," and then a pretend homeless person like living on the corner, like begging for money and accosting people. And so we had like so in a cleaned up New York, we had to have virtual homeless people and virtual rape victims,
Right.
Because that was the only ones we could find, and we had to pay the money. So it was like a sign of the times. And we couldn't afford to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. You see like neighborhoods now, like Williamsburg, or that. Whenever I would tell like my uncle like that we were playing a show there, like he remembers it from like the '80s. He's like, "What the fuck are you guys doing over there?" And I'm like, "No, it's cool now. It's very nice now. It's actually crowded. I can't find parking."
There's a way to do it without, because I'm not anti-progress, but I'm anti too much progress. You have to keep an equilibrium about it. And if this city would subsidize coolness, and because that's what New York is about, that's the currency we trade in,
Right.
is coolness and trends and fabulosity and all that. So if you get rid of that, New York is still now selling what we had 30 years ago. We're not creating any more of it really,
Right.
but we're still banking on the what we've saved up from, and it was so powerful back then that we've managed to save up some currency of that.
Right.
But eventually it's going to be gone. Because enough people are going to realize that we don't do that anymore. So the city should really be subsidizing that and like funding it and making sure that it still exists. Because if they would just make housing for it and like whatever, like other cities in Berlin, other cities do that.
Mm-hmm.
If we would do it, New York would get a huge boost out of that, because the ideas that come out of these groups are ideas that eventually go to Madison Avenue and whatever,
Right.
and to the advertising firms and fashion houses and whatever, and make New York City like the focal point again. Because at that time in the 80s and 90s, New York City really was the center of everything: fashion, music, art, everything. And I know there's the internet now, so it kind of decentralizes everything.
Yeah.
But you still want an area where people are going to be walking on the street, bumping into each other, and making things happen that wouldn't normally happen if there was just a computer. So,
Yeah, very true.
the city should be doing that, and it's what we were doing as a nightclub. We were subsidizing that by paying people like RuPaul and Richie Rich and whatever, just paying them basically to come to the club every night, so that they would have their lives and time to hone their skills to do whatever it was they were going to do, and become somebody. I don't know of any clubs that do that now.
No. And I mean, if in those years, think of how many people you prompted to come in from, Jersey and Long Island.
We would go get them and bring them to New York and give them apartments and set them up with jobs and everything.
Yeah, or just people like me who would just come for the night and spend
yeah.
my money
Yeah.
in New York City instead of Long Island, and
Yeah.
that's a whole like commerce that I think Julianne and them overlooked.
And we did all the studies. We showed that nightclubs, that at one point there was something like 50,000 people going out at a night in New York City, and we showed how it made more money for the city than Broadway and all these other things combined.
Keeping money going on like off-peak hours all throughout the night, when they're looking at money that's being made during the day, and then there's just money being made 24 hours, being employing people and going around and around. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So in wrapping, basically, two last things. If you could just tell us about the Peeew.
Yeah.
Tell us everything you're doing right now.
I'm working on. I came home and I felt like I needed to, I guess, prove myself, either to myself or to other people, that I was still, viable or culturally relevant or whatever. So I took on like all these projects. Basically, while I did a lot of time in solitary confinement. So while I was there, I came up with a lot of ideas, and I sometimes I write them on toilet paper or whatever, because you don't always get paper and pencil or whatever. So I came home with the box of all this stuff, all these ideas, and it felt like I had to implement all of them all at once. And so I started like 20 projects and wasn't able to really complete any of them because I was doing so much. So I had to pare it down, and I pared it down to like 7 or 8, but that was still too many. And everybody was telling me to pare it down to 1. I was like, 1? Like,
have we met? I'm not doing 1.
So now I have it down to like 3. And I think that 3 is a neat number that I can work with, because I put an ad on Facebook and Instagram asking for assistance, and I got like a few hundred responses, and many of them are in Ridgewood where I live. So if they're in my neighborhood, I think maybe one a day, could come over and work on one project each for that day. And so maybe I could do maybe 4 or 5 projects. But so the Peew is one of them. Is it a podcast? I don't know what it is even. It's
think
like
of
a
it
web
as
series.
a podcast, but it's a little bit more because you're on camera.
Yeah.
It's not just audio only.
Right.
And but I mean, for lack of a better way to do it, say as podcast. Yeah.
So we're launching a Patreon page in a day or two, and I don't know how I could give you the link, I guess. And then,
we'll put all that stuff up.
We started off. It was just like sort of me and Ernie Glam, my roommate at the time. We would talk. We'd have all kinds of fun conversations at breakfast, and we thought. We could do like a morning show because we would watch The View and all these other shows, and we would thought, well, we're funnier than they are, so there should just be a camera here. So we just put a camera at our table and filmed the first few episodes, and that's all it was. And when I watched them now, I'm thinking, oh my God, how could anybody watch this? Because they're very slow, and it's very much like, who cares? But then we sped up like everything else, and now, and I remember when we had 100 subscribers, we thought, oh my God, 100 people are watching us. Now there's like 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And so we're launching this Patreon page that hopefully people will put some money into it so that we can make it a real show, because the idea was to make it like The View, only we call it The Peew because it stinks. And I wanted to have a table of like 5 gay men discussing the same topics that they discuss on The Peew, the same exact topics, but only from a gay man's point of view. So we wouldn't even have to come up with content. We'd just watch what they do and then discuss what they discussed. So I want to raise enough money to build that table with the View thing on it, and we, well, I don't know if I should. Somebody who works at The View provided us with an opening and closing segment that is just like the Views, only it says The Peew. I hope they don't get in trouble for it. They can't. They said not to attach their name to it anyway.
Yeah.
But it looks just like it, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm doing that, and then I'm doing something called Skroddlesquad, which is an online version of what I was doing in New York. It's like kind of like the misfits and the weirdos and the freaks of all around the world, and we have a community. And we have different representatives, like in Rome or in Iceland, and wherever. And so the idea is that if you're going to go to one of these cities, you click on the city, and then it'll tell you who the Skroddlesquad representative is, and then that person will show you who all the cool people are in that city and the people who are like us and who will be tolerant of whatever you are.
Right.
And if you're in Canada, it'll be the people who are tolerant of the beast. You can fuck dogs and cats and everything.
Right.
And so I'm building that, which is quite difficult because I don't know anything about web design, and a lot of it is web design. Like when we get a new representative, it's unbelievable work to add that city onto the Skroddlesquad website.
Okay.
But so I'm going to start a Patreon page for that too after this one gets going.
Right.
And then I'm doing Skroddle Face, which is a clothing line. This is a Skroddle Face shirt, and it's basically my artwork, which is what I'm really focusing on, my paintings. I'm doing a collection this year of Celebrity Germs, which is all the Skroddle Face shirts will be have the germ motif, and Skroddlesquad will also have the germ motif, because the idea is that we spread ideas through culture like bacteria. And so I've taken like sexually transmitted diseases like herpes and gonorrhea and syphilis and put celebrity faces on them. Mm-hmm. And then and made diptychs, so that on one side is the germ with the celebrity face, and then on the other side is the germ that will kill that germ, like penicillin or doxycycline or whatever kind of antibiotic. Right, okay. And then on those germs, I put the faces of like Rudolph Giuliani or George Bush or people who've tried to stop people from spreading ideas. Yeah. And they look really good together, like the two germs together. And I'm having an exhibition at Lethal Amounts in Los Angeles. Of my celebrity germs, and it's all done up like
when is that?
It's going to be early next year. They won't give me an actual date until I have 50% of the paintings done, because they've had to move the date now twice. Okay. But the gallery is going to be done up like a laboratory with like lab coats and like white masks and everything, and we have these great computer animated things showing a perimeter around Los Angeles, where with ground zero of this new disease, celebrity germs, and showing that we got the city in quarantine and we're trying to keep it from spreading. And then when the show moves to New York, we'll show that it's now spread to New York, and then it'll spread all around the world.
Oh, that's cool. And you
cool.
just finished. Did you just have a showing? You just finished up with one?
Well, yes, but that was of my old pieces.
Old pieces.
The new pieces. And I'm also doing Con Artist, that's an art collective in New York City, on Ludlow Street. We're doing something on Halloween there. I will have some celebrity germs ready for that. So I'm doing a lot of stuff, actually. And then my books, eventually. I've got I'm working on 4 books.
Four books.
One is a coffee table book of nightclub invitations, which I've got, I think, unless somebody will out there show me that they have more, I think I've got the largest collection in the world of nightclub invitations from New York City. Really great stuff. That would be a great coffee table book, and there's a great story behind each one. And then my autobiography, and then which is Aligula, and then
Aligula,
then I'm doing a more sociological kind of subculture book about the club kids and how they kind of fit in with other subcultures and in the way that they were kind of a reaction to the AIDS epidemic and that kind of thing. And I forgot what the fourth book is. I can't think right now.
Well, you got a lot with 3. You got a lot there.
Aligula is a
See,
great
it's hard to
That's
pare
a
it
great
down
name.
to like a few things.
Yeah. But you got a lot going on, and that's it's wonderful to hear.
I can show you the germs though. They're cruel with them. Madonna is chlamydia. I couldn't not make her chlamydia.
It's chlamydia.
She was really good at chlamydia though.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. I
Yes.
like to hear, everything I heard about you, that thing in the middle there just seemed like something that happened out of character. Like we said, not one thing is, everybody's not one thing. So to see you doing this type of stuff, continue with your art, is the story we like to hear, the redemption part.
That's RuPaul is gonorrhea, and so we call it gonorrhea.
Is she okay with this?
I hope so. Actually,
You'll be the first to know.
It's the kind of thing where you don't know whether if somebody would be more upset if they are in it or not in it.
Right.
That's Donald Trump as some kind of antibiotic, probably penicillin, because he stops the ideas.
Yeah. It's very inspired, Michael.
This is Amanda Lepore's HIV.
Okay. Once again, you'll be the first to know if she's down with it.
Yeah.
So you want to do the last question?
Yeah, we'll do one last question that we ask all our guests. Go ahead, Sam.
All right, so the name of the podcast is If I Ruled the World Podcast. So we like to ask all our guests. So today we're going to ask Michael Alig, if you ruled the world, what would that look like?
Well, my editor, Esther Haynes, we always discuss because we're kind of seeing the way the world is going in the direction of Mad Max, and that it's going to end and eventually end up there, and we want to get out of before Mad Max happens. And so we're always like, what is the thing that's going to happen right before Mad Max, so we can know? And actually, it's kind of like all the things that we thought were the things that were going to happen right before Mad Max are the things that are happening right now. So I guess if I ruled the world, I would probably take like the 1,000 most fabulous and creative people and like hide them someplace where they can like survive
Right.
and keep the ways of the world going while the rest destroy themselves, and maybe that'll be evolution's way of weeding them out because they're going to bring us down. All it takes these days is for one person to like come up with like some kind of like bacteria resistant smallpox or whatever. So you need to get rid of all those crazy people. Ironically, I'm saying you need to get rid of all the crazy people because it really is all the normal people that are like so crazy and the crazy people who aren't so crazy.
That's one of my favorite answers that we've had in 20, 30 episodes.
Yeah.
Definitely, just like cultivate creativity and people like that.
And it would change the whole human race because we're in a hypermodernity right now, which is the after postmodern, and that's the fear of things speeding up. And we're supposed to, when the singularity happens in 2047, I think, we're supposed to lose like half of the human race because it'll be speeding up so fast that they won't be able to keep up. So those will probably be the people that we'll lose, the ones who. It'll be like the biggest nightclub in the world where half the people don't get in.
That's
Perfect.
That's a perfect way to put it. You start humanity with fabulousness. Yeah.
So thank you for
Thanks,
doing
Michael.
this. And that's it, right?
If I ruled the world, I love 'em, baby.